Oh my God, what is all this? So much money. Is it real? These jewels are incredible. I have to take this. Oh my God. It's a treasure. I can't believe it. Oh my God. It's a treasure trove. Gold coins so shiny. I have to see what's inside. Oh my God, what is all this? This is incredible. It's real. I have to take this and go.
Rain lashed against the frosted glass of Marcus Langford's law office, casting erratic, watery shadows across the room. Sloane Whitaker sat perfectly still in the high-backed leather chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Opposite her, Marcus, a man whose wrinkles seemed carved by years of delivering uncomfortable news, pushed a heavy manila envelope across the polished wood. Harlan Whitaker, Sloane's father, had recently passed. He was a man who had existed as a ghost long before his heart actually stopped beating. Known to the residents of Oak Haven, Massachusetts, merely as the reclusive proprietor of Whitaker Horology, Harlan had spent his life surrounded by the relentless ticking of antique clocks, completely insulated from the daughter he had sent away to boarding school at a young age. Sloane had returned to Oak Haven, expecting nothing more than a few boxes of dusty grandfather clocks and the finality of signing away a dilapidated storefront. "That is everything, Sloane," Marcus said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I understand it is not what you might have expected." Sloane reached out, her fingers brushing the thick paper of the envelope. She opened the unsealed flap and tipped the contents onto the desk. A single heavy brass key clattered against the mahogany. It was an antique barrel key, its bow heavily tarnished and bearing a strange interlocking crest that looked like a pair of crossed ivy vines. There was no deed, no bank statements, no life insurance policy. "A key?" Sloane asked, her brow furrowing. "To what? The shop?" "The shop was heavily mortgaged, Sloane." Marcus sighed, removing his spectacles and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "The bank took possession of the property recently. His residential cottage on Elm Street is a rental. I managed to secure you a short window to clear out his personal belongings, but as for his estate, there is none. Only this." Sloane stared at the rusted metal. It was a slap in the face from beyond the grave. Harlan had spent many years running a supposedly successful business, yet he had died penniless, leaving his only child a piece of scrap metal. "Did he leave a letter?" she asked, fighting the bitter tightening in her throat. "Just a note attached to the key tag," Marcus pointed. Sloane flipped the small yellowed cardboard tag tied to the key. Written in her father's cramped, precise handwriting were 3 words: "Look behind time." An hour later, Sloane stood on the porch of the small Elm Street cottage. The rain had reduced to a dismal drizzle. The house smelled exactly as she remembered from her brief, awkward childhood visits of machine oil, stale pipe tobacco, and aged wood. The silence in the house was profound, made even heavier by the sheer number of clocks hanging on the walls, sitting on the mantels, and occupying the corners. None of them were ticking. Harlan had apparently stopped winding them in his final days. "Look behind time." Sloane walked into the living room, her boots echoing on the scuffed hardwood floor. Clocks surrounded her. Cuckoo clocks from the Black Forest, sleek mid-century modern desk clocks, and towering English grandfather clocks. She spent the initial hours methodically moving every single timepiece in the house. She checked behind the heavy oak cabinets. She pulled down wall clocks, leaving pale rectangles on the faded wallpaper. She found nothing but dust bunnies and dead spiders. Frustration boiled over into genuine anger. "What kind of sick game is this, Dad?" she muttered to the empty room. She collapsed onto the moth-eaten floral sofa, the heavy brass key digging into the palm of her hand. As twilight began to creep through the dusty windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the floorboards, Sloane's eyes locked onto the largest clock in the house. It was an imposing 8-foot-tall mahogany long-case clock, bolted to the far wall of the study. It was a permanent fixture, one she recalled her father fiercely protecting. "Never touch the Astoria, Sloane. He used to snap whenever her childhood curiosity brought her too close to the glass casing. She stood up, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. The Astoria did not just sit against the wall, it was built into the recessed alcove of the room. Sloane approached the towering antique. The brass pendulum hung dead behind the glass. She reached out and pulled the ornate wooden door open. The intricate gears and weights sat dormant. She ran her fingers along the interior wooden panel behind the swinging space of the pendulum. It felt solid, but as she pressed against the bottom left corner, the wood gave a fraction of an inch with a soft click. Her breath hitched. She pushed harder, sliding the interior panel to the right. It moved smoothly on concealed tracks, revealing a dark, narrow void in the wall. Cold, stale air wafted out, carrying the scent of damp earth and old paper. Sloane pulled her smartphone from her pocket, activating the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow set of wooden stairs leading down into an impossibly deep basement. The Elm Street cottage was not supposed to have a basement. The property rested on solid bedrock, or so the town records claimed. At the bottom of the stairs, the light hit a heavy, iron-reinforced oak door. In the center of the iron plate was a single, large keyhole. Sloane gripped the brass key her father had left her. Her hand was trembling. She descended the creaking stairs, the air growing colder with every step. When she reached the bottom, she inserted the key. It slid in with a satisfying heaviness. She turned it. The mechanism inside groaned loudly, a sound of heavy tumblers falling into place after years of disuse, and the door swung inward on well-oiled hinges. Sloane stepped into the room, sweeping her phone's light across the space. Her hand fumbled along the brick wall until she found a cold, metal pull chain. She yanked it. 3 bare, low-wattage bulbs flickered to life, casting a sickly yellow glow over the hidden chamber. She gasped. The room was not a storage cellar. It was a meticulously organized vault, but there were no stacks of gold bullion or velvet bags filled with diamonds. Instead, the room was lined from floor to ceiling with heavy steel filing cabinets, dozens of leather-bound ledgers resting on a central oak table, and rows of small numbered safety deposit boxes built directly into the far masonry wall. Sloane walked slowly toward the central table. The ledgers were bound in dark crimson leather, their spines completely unmarked. She opened the first one. The pages were filled with her father's immaculate, spidery handwriting. She squinted at the first entry. Thomas Whitmore. Collateral. Stock certificates. Whitmore Mills. Debt. $150,000. Interest. 10% monthly. Security. Photographic negatives. Safe box 14. Sloane frowned. Thomas Whitmore was the former county commissioner, a man celebrated for his philanthropy. Why was he borrowing money at extortionate rates from a humble clockmaker? She flipped the pages rapidly. Eleanor Vance. Collateral. Estate jewelry. Debt. $45,000. Security. Medical records. Unauthorized clinic. Safe box 22. Jonathan Hayes. Collateral. None. Debt. $300,000. Security. Signed confession. Hit and run. Route 9. Safe box 41. The blood drained from Sloane's face. Harlan Whitaker was not just a clockmaker. He was the shadow bank of Oak Haven. He was a loan shark who did not just deal in cash. He dealt in leverage. The town's elite had not just mortgaged their homes to him. They had mortgaged their reputations, their freedom, and their darkest sins. Sloane dropped the ledger, taking a step back as if the book had burned her. The sheer volume of secrets contained in this room was staggering. If these ledgers saw the light of day, half the town's aristocracy would be in prison, and the other half would be ruined. She turned her attention to a smaller, modern, black notebook sitting apart from the antique ledgers. This one looked relatively new. She opened it. The ink was fresh. Sylvia Carmichael. Total owed $1.2 million. Final notice ignored. Proceeding with asset liquidation. Security. The Blackwood deeds. Safe box 7. Sylvia Carmichael, the current sitting mayor of Oak Haven, a woman who had built her political career on a platform of unyielding morality and anti-corruption. Sloane rushed over to the wall of safety deposit boxes. She found number 7. The master key her father had left her, the one that had opened the heavy oak door, had a secondary, smaller notch on the tip. She inserted it into the box and twisted. The small metal door popped open. Inside was a thick envelope of legal documents and a small velvet jewelry box. Sloane unfolded the documents first. They were deed transfers signed over in secret by the city council, transferring ownership of the abandoned, sprawling Blackwood estate on the edge of town directly to a shell corporation owned by Sylvia Carmichael. But attached to the deeds was something far more explosive: a geological survey report. According to the report, the land beneath the Blackwood estate sat on one of the largest untapped lithium deposits in the state, worth tens of millions of dollars. The mayor had deliberately zoned the area as toxic, driving down the land value so she could purchase it for pennies through her shell company, right before she planned to rezone it for mining. Harlan Whitaker had found out, bankrolled her initial purchase to trap her, and kept the actual deeds as collateral. Sloane opened the velvet box. Inside rested a breathtaking, flawless emerald ring, an heirloom piece Sloane recognized instantly. It was the Carmichael family crest ring, famously reported stolen some time ago, a theft that had resulted in a hefty insurance payout for the mayor. Her father had died holding the keys to an absolute empire of blackmail. He was holding millions of dollars in leverage. The treasure was not cash. It was control over the entire town. Suddenly, a loud, shattering crash echoed from upstairs. Sloane jumped, dropping the velvet box. The emerald rolled across the concrete floor. Dust drifted down from the ceiling as heavy, frantic footsteps thundered across the floorboards of the living room above. Someone had broken into the house. "Mitchell!" A muffled, aggressive male voice shouted from upstairs. "We know he left it here. Tear the place apart." Sloane's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She scrambled to her knees, snatched the emerald, and shoved it, along with the deeds and the black notebook, into her leather tote bag. She clicked off her phone's flashlight, plunging the room back into the dim, sickly yellow glow of the bare bulbs. The footsteps above grew heavier, moving toward the study. The sound of clocks being smashed against the floor echoed violently. They were destroying the house, looking for the very thing Sloane now held in her bag. Then, the footsteps stopped right above her head, right in front of the Astoria clock. "Look at this." The voice drifted down, clearer now through the hidden alcove. "The panel is open." Sloane backed away into the deepest shadows of the vault, her eyes locked on the heavy oak door. She had left it ajar. Heavy boots began to descend the wooden stairs. Heavy boots hit the bottom of the wooden staircase, sending vibrations through the damp concrete floor. Sloane pressed herself flat against the farthest wall of the vault, her spine digging into the cold edges of the safety deposit boxes. She clutched the leather tote bag to her chest, her knuckles turning white. She had clicked off her phone's flashlight, plunging her corner into absolute darkness, relying only on the sickly yellow glow illuminating the center of the room. 2 men stepped into the vault. They were not local burglars looking for a quick pawnshop score. They wore dark, tailored raincoats, their faces obscured by the shadows of the low-hanging bulbs. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow, let out a low whistle as he took in the wall of steel filing cabinets and the oak table covered in crimson ledgers. "Well, I will be damned," the scarred man muttered, walking toward the table. "The old spider really did keep it all down here. The mayor was not exaggerating." "Grab the Carmichael file and the Blackwood deeds," the second man ordered, his voice clipped and professional. "Do not bother with the rest. We will bring a crew to torch this basement tomorrow. Leave no paper trail." Sloane held her breath until her lungs burned. The men were entirely focused on the central table, flipping through the crimson ledgers with gloved hands. They were between her and the heavy oak door. She only had one advantage, the element of total surprise, and the fact that Harlan Whitaker's vault was designed by a paranoid man. The heavy iron-reinforced door was still ajar, precisely how she had left it. The master brass key, The only way to engage the massive tumblers was currently sitting in her coat pocket. The scarred man picked up a ledger, shaking his head. He organized it by year. Where the hell is the recent stuff? Look for a black notebook, the second man snapped, turning toward the wall of safety deposit boxes. He was walking right toward her. Sloane did not have time to think. She acted on pure, unadulterated adrenaline. She launched herself from the shadows, ducking low under the second man's outstretched arm. She shoulder-checked him hard enough to send him stumbling into the steel cabinets with a deafening crash, then sprinted for the stairs. "Hey!" the scarred man yelled, dropping the ledger and lunging for her. His fingers grazed the strap of her tote bag, but the leather slipped through his grip. Sloane slammed her weight against the heavy oak door, hauling it shut with a violent screech of hinges. The door collided with the doorframe, just as the scarred man slammed against the inside of the wood. Sloane shoved the antique brass key into the exterior keyhole and twisted it with both hands. The heavy tumblers engaged with a massive metallic thunk, just as fists began pounding furiously against the iron plating from the inside. "Open this door!" A muffled roar echoed from the vault. Sloane did not wait. She scrambled up the wooden stairs, her boots slipping on the dusty treads. She burst through the hidden panel of the Astoria clock, scrambled through the ruined living room, now a graveyard of shattered glass and broken clockwork, and threw open the front door. The cold Massachusetts rain hit her face like a slap. She sprinted down Elm Street, her lungs screaming, clutching the leather bag as if her life depended on it. Because it did. 20 minutes later, soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably, Sloane pounded on the heavy oak door of a colonial house on the affluent west side of Oak Haven. The porch light flicked on, and Marcus Langford opened the door, wearing a silk dressing gown and looking utterly bewildered. "Sloane, good Lord, what happened to you?" the lawyer asked, ushering her into the warm foyer. Sloane bypassed the pleasantries, marching straight into Marcus's study and dropping the soaked leather tote onto his pristine mahogany desk. She reached inside and pulled out the black notebook, the Blackwood estate deeds, the Apex Geoscience Geological Survey, and finally, the velvet box containing the flawless Carmichael emerald. Marcus's eyes widened behind his spectacles as he took in the items. He picked up the emerald ring, holding it up to the light of his desk lamp. His hand began to tremble. "My father was not a clockmaker," Sloane said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and exhaustion. "He was a monster. He was holding this entire town hostage, and Mayor Carmichael just sent 2 men to my house to kill me and burn the evidence." Marcus slowly lowered the ring, collapsing into his leather armchair. He did not look surprised. He looked defeated. "I knew Harlan kept insurance," Marcus whispered, rubbing his temples. "But I never knew the extent of it. Decades ago, before you were born, Vivian Carmichael's father and a consortium of local bankers systematically destroyed your grandfather's manufacturing business. They drove him to bankruptcy to steal his patents. Your father swore he would tear their empire down from the inside. I suppose this was his life's work." "He was blackmailing them," Sloane countered. "He was a loan shark." "He was a man who traded in leverage," Marcus corrected quietly. "But Sloane, you cannot take this to the Oak Haven police. The chief of police owes his pension to Mayor Carmichael. If you walk into that precinct with these documents, you will be arrested for the theft of the emerald ring. The ledgers will disappear, and you will spend the next many years in a federal penitentiary." Sloane stared at him, the reality of the situation settling like a lead weight in her stomach. "Then what do I do? They know I have it. I locked her fixers in the vault, but they will get out eventually. I cannot run forever." Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. Then a slow, grim smile crept onto his weathered face. He reached for his desk phone. "We do not run, Sloane," Marcus said, his voice hardening with a resolve she had not heard before. "Harlan spent many years building a trap. We are going to spring it, but we are not going to use the local authorities. I have a contact at the State Attorney General's office in Boston, an assistant attorney general named Harrison Caldwell. He has been trying to build a corruption case against Carmichael for some time, but never had the paper trail. Marcus dialed the number, his eyes locked on the Blackwood deeds. Your father left you the key for a reason, Sloane. He knew his heart was failing, and he knew you were the only person with the moral fortitude to actually burn their empire to the ground. Let us finish the job. The Oak Haven Town Hall was a monument to New England opulence, with vaulted ceilings, mahogany pews, and a massive stained glass window depicting the town's founders. On a brisk morning, the hall was packed to capacity. The agenda for the emergency city council meeting was singular: the expedited rezoning of the Blackwood estate from industrial wasteland to private commercial development. Mayor Vivian Carmichael stood at the podium. She was a striking woman in her later years, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit, exuding the practiced warmth of a career politician. The revitalization of the Blackwood sector will bring hundreds of jobs to Oak Haven, Carmichael projected into the microphone, her voice echoing through the hall. We have a private developer ready to assume the burden of the toxic cleanup at no cost to the taxpayer. It is a historic win for our community. She raised her gavel, ready to cement her multi-million-dollar lithium heist. If there are no further objections from the council, I move to... I object. The voice cut through the silence of the hall like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned. Sloane Whitaker walked down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing sharply against the marble floor. She wore a tailored black coat, her posture rigid, her eyes locked dead onto the mayor. Flanking her on her right was Marcus Langford. Flanking her on her left were three men in dark suits, bearing the distinct, intimidating aura of federal law enforcement. Mayor Carmichael's practiced smile faltered. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking suddenly fragile. Ms. Whitaker, this is a closed council vote. You do not have the floor. I do not need the floor, Vivian, Sloane said, stopping at the front row. She unzipped a black portfolio and pulled out a stack of enlarged, high-resolution photographs. She slapped the first one onto the evidence table at the front of the room. It was a blown-up image of the Apex Geoscience Survey. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I have the original geological survey for the Blackwood estate. Sloane spoke clearly, ensuring the local press corps in the back row heard every word. Confirming a lithium deposit valued at roughly $80 million. A survey commissioned by a shell company registered to your maiden name. Carmichael gripped the edges of the podium, her knuckles white. This is absurd. Security, remove this woman immediately. The two town police officers by the doors stepped forward, but the men in dark suits turned, flashing badges that read, State Attorney General's Office. The local officers immediately froze, stepping back into the shadows. Sloane placed a second item on the table. It was the velvet box. She popped it open, revealing the brilliant, flawless Carmichael emerald. The crowd gasped. Reported stolen to Fidelity Insurance some time ago for a payout of $2 million. Sloane continued, her voice unwavering. Used as collateral to secure a shadow loan from my father, Harlan Whitaker, to purchase the Blackwood land before you poisoned the zoning laws to drop the price. You have no proof of these insane allegations, Carmichael hissed, her composure shattering. Your father was a lunatic clockmaker. He was, Sloane agreed softly. But he was a meticulous one. Assistant Attorney General Caldwell currently has his team excavating a hidden vault beneath Elm Street. They have recovered many years' worth of handwritten ledgers, blackmail material, and signed confessions detailing the systemic corruption of this city council. They also recovered the two armed fixers you sent to murder me, whom I locked in that vault recently. They were very eager to cut a plea deal. The silence in the hall was absolute. It was the sound of an entire political dynasty collapsing in real time. A man in a dark suit, Harrison Caldwell, stepped forward, producing a folded piece of paper from his breast pocket. Vivian Carmichael, you are under arrest for fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. As the state agents moved in to place the mayor in handcuffs, chaos erupted in the town hall. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and several city council members quietly tried to slip out the side doors, only to be intercepted by waiting state troopers. Sloane did not stay to watch the circus. She turned and walked back down the center aisle, the heavy oak doors closing behind her, shutting out the noise of Oak Haven's reckoning. Later, the dust finally settled. The state of Massachusetts seized the Blackwood estate, turning the lithium mining rights over to a heavily regulated, state-run initiative that actually funded Oak Haven's public infrastructure. The criminal trial saw the mayor and half the city council sentenced to federal prison. As for Sloane, the state invoked a little-known whistleblower statute regarding the recovery of stolen state resources and insurance fraud. She was awarded a percentage of the recovered assets, a sum nearing $4 million. Sloane stood on the porch of the Elm Street cottage one last time. The house had been cleared by the feds, the clock sold at auction, the vault sealed in concrete. She held the rusted brass key in her hand, feeling its cold weight. Her father had been a flawed, deeply vengeful man. He had lived in the shadows, surrounded by the ticking of time he could never get back, hoarding the sins of others. But in the end, he had entrusted his daughter with the power to tear down the rot. He did not leave her money, he left her the truth, and the truth had paid out a treasure no one could have ever expected. Sloane walked to the edge of the property, reeled her arm back, and hurled the antique key as far as she could into the overgrown woods. She turned her back on Oak Haven, walked to her car, and drove away, finally leaving the ghosts and the ticking clocks behind her. The truth has a funny way of refusing to stay buried, does it not? If Sloane's journey into her father's dark past kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and share this video with your fellow mystery lovers. Do not forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss out on our thrilling true story deep dives. What would you do if you found that key? Let us know below.